guys have a lot of comments, and I know there's strong feelings about this stuff. So let's just jump right in. I'm going to ask the panel to let us go down the row and have the panel introduce themselves. All right, well, before we introduce the panel, we're going to have just a brief couple of words from a special guest who I didn't expect, but we're always so happy to have him at our events and have him give some introductory remarks about the cannabis industry in Vermont. He is one of our great leaders of the cannabis movement in Vermont, and we're so happy to see him, Lieutenant Governor David Zuckerman.
Thank you. I guess membership has its privileges. I really just came to observe for a little bit, and they said, hey, you want to say a few words? So thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. I know many of you have been, either in your heart and souls and or in your activism and actions, been working towards this point in time that keeps being in front of us as opposed to now. And I can tell you that I am as frustrated as many of you are that metaphorically, the walls of my office, which is just one little old room in the State House, has lots of dents from where my head is banged against the wall, with respect, which is metaphorical, not literal, but with respect to lost opportunity for Vermont, lost opportunity for rural Vermont in particular, lost opportunity for reforming these laws with respect to criminal injustice and criminal justice reform, lost opportunity to have Vermonters who are making a living under the table become recognized as the citizens and business people that they are with respect to this plant, where we seem to honor and reward and get excited about our amazing, and it deserves kudos, microbrew industry and alcohol industry in Vermont and special spirits industry, and yet we are still trying to get over the hurdle of the propaganda of 80 years, 90 years around this plant somehow being the demon, while alcohol is accepted in society, when the reality is this plant is also accepted in society by the vast majority of Vermonters, and but it's the political roadblocks that are frankly the only thing that's left in the way. And my quick analysis, if I can have 1 or 2 minutes, is sadly not as optimistic as I would like to be with this upcoming session, because when the House and Senate aren't on the same page, it's a whole lot harder to then tag team and then be on the same page to pressure the governor with enough support to let something become law or sign something into law. And my appeal to everybody in my broader role as Lieutenant Governor, which I've considered my biggest mantle that I've had to carry the last 2 years, is really as an ambassador for democracy. And I was just at a class at UVM, and I asked how many people in that classroom had called a legislator or a civic leader, elected leader, in the last 6 to 12 months. And I'll ask this room the same thing. I'm hoping and expecting a fair number of you will raise your hands. But how many of you have contacted your legislator in the last 6 to 12 months on this topic? Okay, now that's better than the classroom at UVM, but not nearly as good as I would like it to be. Now, the good news is, for those of you that have not raised your hands, there's no shame in that, and you actually give me hope. Because the reality is, when we're this close with the fact that 30% of the room raise their hands, think how close we'll be when 100% of this room can raise their hands 2 months from now if I were to ask you the same question as those legislators are getting ready to go to Montpelier and debate and deliberate on these topics. And whether it's this topic or any other topic, you're either a part of democracy or someone else is speaking for you. And the thing to remember is, you in this room probably know far more about this topic than most legislators do, either because of the research you've done or the personal experience that you have. Most legislators, including political leaders like myself, know a little bit about a wide range of things and only become more knowledgeable on the topic when it becomes one of the hot topics that's being discussed. And the only people that we have as resources, not only, but the majority of where the resources are paid representatives who are in that building, good and bad, and yet you often know more on the thing that you deeply care about, whether it's this topic or some other. And so I urge you to shift the way democracy is working right now and the way it's falling apart at the national level, and make it into the way it's supposed to work the way we can in Vermont, by participating, calling, asking questions, and offering your knowledge as a resource to your legislator. The last thing I'll say, because there's a legislator here, and I want to recognize and thank you for being here, Representative Tochka from Charlotte, is, yes, applause, he's here. If you were to go up to him and say, you better do this, just like if you did it with your family, or you do that with your friends, the reaction is not going to be as positive as if you ask, where are you on this issue? Why do you support it, or what are your concerns? And then you can offer, and you don't have to do that to Michael, he's here, he's going to be learning a lot, but to your own representative, if you tell people what to do, then that doesn't work out as well. And they have 5,000 to 10,000 people they represent as legislators, more if they're a senator, 600,000 if they're a lieutenant governor. We're hearing from a lot of different people. So let the people that disagree with us yell at them about what they should be doing. If you're respectful and have dialogue with them, which is what's greatly missing from our political discourse today, and you offer the information you have, then we can get over the hurdles of the demonization of this product for the last 80 years. And we can talk about the possibilities of rural economic development, keeping young people in Vermont, and moving forward in our communities instead of dragging our heels with respect to the criminal justice reform that also is part of this. So thank you. I hope this is a great conversation. You got an amazing panel of folks up here to ask questions of. Many of them are knowledgeable both about the topic itself, the system in Montpelier, the different drafts of legislation, the ideas that are before you, and please feel free to reach out to my office anytime. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much to Lieutenant Governor Zuckerman for those remarks and for being here today. Thank you. So with that, I think I'll just have the panel go down and introduce themselves to you.
Hi, I'm Subin. I'm an attorney and I direct the Vermont Coalition to Regulate Marijuana, and we have been working hard on legalization since 2014, and I will just make a disclaimer for the word marijuana in the title of my organization. When we started working in the legislature, all of the laws that referred to cannabis referred to it as marijuana. THC containing cannabis referred to it as marijuana, and one of the nice things that we're seeing already is an evolution in the language that we're using, and so all the new legislative proposals are using cannabis only. So that's a sign of progress.
Hello everybody, I'm Tim Fair, founder and co-owner of Vermont Cannabis Solutions. We're the first exclusively cannabis law and consulting firm here in the state, and just really happy to be on this panel with some amazing people. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dave Silberman. I'm an attorney and a pro bono drug policy reform advocate. I live in Middlebury. Spent a lot of time in the State House. I've been working with legislators, starting with Dave actually. It was one of my first phone calls back in early 2015. Working on this bill and previous bills, trying to make sure that we've got a cannabis market that works for Vermonters and not for big out-of-state money interests. Funny story, last time I was in this room and on this stage, over the summer there was a yoga retreat here in town, and I was wearing very, very different clothes while demonstrating a handstand.
Hello, my name is John Gannon. I'm the state rep for Halifax, Whitingham, and Wilmington, which is in the southern part of the state. There are 3 rural communities who could tremendously benefit from some, program legalization of cannabis. I'm the vice chair of the House Government Operations Committee, which worked extensively on S.54 this past legislative session. We talked to a lot of people that are up here on this panel and other people, and I think we did a good job of reaching out to many of the different committees in the House who also took testimony on various aspects of this bill. I think this bill has received a lot of attention in the House, and I'm hopeful that it will get through the House this session.
Thanks to the panel for being here. And I want to start with you, John, if you could. Explain where we are in the legislative process. Where did we leave off last time? What's going to happen when we start up again in January? What hurdles, just procedurally, do we have to get across to have this bill pass this session?
Sure. So the S.54 was a Senate bill, so it passed overwhelmingly in the Senate early in the session. And so then it came over to the House and was assigned to my committee, House Government Operations, where we took extensive testimony and voted it out on a bipartisan, with bipartisan support on a 10-0-1 vote. That's a very strong vote out of our House Government Operations Committee. I mean, we had some people who were skeptical, but we got them around. Now the bill is in House Ways and Means, which is one of our two money committees. They're reviewing it, most specifically around tax issues, which we did not spend an extensive amount of time on, and I'm sure they will touch on other things. The other committee that is likely to see this bill is House Appropriations. Those are the two money committees. There's various money aspects. You have tax and revenue that are both parts of this bill. So they'll review it and takes votes on it. And if it gets through those two committees, then I would anticipate it would be going to the floor for vote of the full House.
And so what are we looking at as far as timing, if you have an estimate on when those things might happen?
Well, I know that House Ways and Means has already asked the Speaker for time before the session to start working on the bill. So hopefully House Ways and Means will be up to speed early in the session. And I know that we've already briefed the Chair and Vice Chair of House Appropriations on the bill. So they're aware of it. So I think it can get through those two committees fairly quickly. Obviously, it's up to leadership as to when the vote's scheduled.
Okay.
Andrew, if I can.
I think it's something that, just observing very closely what important people are saying. The majority leader, who's a representative here in Burlington, has said, she said at the end of last session, that taking up this bill will be a priority for the Democratic caucus in January. So I think what's important for those of you out there who want to advocate for passage is to make sure that your representative hears that message, that, well, your leadership has said this will be a priority, and we expect you, as your constituents, we expect you to make that a priority and follow those words with actions. That is going to be critical to keeping this timeline moving along fast. We need to get this bill out of the House, back over to the Senate, early, because there is going to be some pretty intense negotiation between the House and the Senate over the particulars. All the do we cross that I or dot that T over there? That is going to be a lot of time-consuming work. So we need to get it out of the House quickly.
Let's stick with you, Dave, for a second. And if you could describe in the draft bill the role of the Cannabis Control Board. What kind of decisions will be in the statute, and what types of decisions will be left to the Cannabis Control Board? Who's going to be appointed to that board? Who's going to make those appointments? If you could talk about briefly about the role of the Cannabis Control Board.
Sure. So broadly, what this legislation envisions, which is different from previous iterations of cannabis regulation bills, is a new independent board called the Cannabis Control Board that will be in charge of the overall regulatory apparatus here. It envisions that additional agencies like the Department of Taxes will be involved, the Agency of Agriculture, Farms and Markets will be involved, the Secretary of Health will have some input here and there, but it all funnels through this Cannabis Control Board. Now, the Senate passed a version of the bill, the House Government Operations Committee passed a different version of that bill. The Senate bill envisions this board consisting of 3 people. I'm a little concerned. 3 people is not really enough to handle all of the work that's involved. The House envisions 5. The House also envisions an advisory panel underneath that board of 5, with more broad experiences, with different people with different expertise coming together and advising the board and helping the board make its decisions. I think that's quite wise. We don't want to have 5 bureaucrats making all the decisions in a vacuum without listening to the people who actually know what the heck they're talking about. We can talk a bit about the composition of that board. I think we're going to talk a little later about social justice, and I think there's some real important things involved there in the composition of the board. So I'll leave that aside. You asked kind of what does the bill mandate versus what does the bill give the board flexibility to decide. The bill lays out, and we talk about these particulars too, the types of licenses that can be issued, the qualifications for who can get these licenses, how many licenses you can have, things like that, what each license entitles you to do. It sets out some broad things like what the board must do in its regulatory approach in terms of a package of edibles won't be able to contain more than 100 milligrams of THC. A single serving of edibles won't be more than 10 milligrams. That's very similar to what you're seeing in all the other states, except Massachusetts actually limits servings to 5 milligrams, which I thought was interesting. We can get into that later. Those things are mandated. The board is then given a lot of regulatory discretionary authority to set rules, the very particulars. So, the board is going to be mandated to take applications starting at a particular date. What that application form looks like, what questions they ask, that's going to be up to the board to determine. So when you think about, statutory versus regulatory, the statutory is broad strokes. The regulatory is that fine nitty-gritty. The regulatory process is complex. It is time-consuming. There will absolutely be opportunities for people to weigh in on those finer details, both as the control board holds public hearings, and every meeting it has is by law required to be open to the public and advertised in advance. So there will be that opportunity. And also any regulations have to go before a legislative committee on rules, and those hearings are open, and those are your representatives on those committees, and it gives you yet another opportunity to weigh in. So I'm confident that we will, through continuous and continued public pressure, get these rules to be right. And I hope you guys all join me in that effort.
Okay, super important. Again, good discussion of this distinction between what we can do in Montpelier lobbying the legislature and what's going to have to wait for essentially lobbying the Cannabis Control Board or going to their meetings or going to the regulatory rules meetings. But that's a great discussion. Thank you for that. So I want to move to Tim. Dave just described how the Cannabis Control Board is going to be up to a lot of the finer details, Tim. So, how many licenses are there going to be? How much are they going to cost?
There are going to be 42 licenses. They're going to go $64.95 each. Obviously these are the details that are going to be handled at the Cannabis Control Board level. There has been some discussion in S.54 of preferences where, really trying to focus on keeping this local, especially when in terms of cultivation, expedited processes on small-scale cultivation licenses. But when it comes to things like exact numbers of how many, how are they going to be distributed, what the cost is going to be, what the application is going to be, those are going to be issues that will be dealt with by the Cannabis Control Board as opposed to the legislature, which personally I think is a great idea. Much like the Liquor Control Board, if they make a rule saying there's 45 licenses available and that proves to be too few, very much easier process to be able to get some more added on rather than trying to go back to the legislature and redo statutory law. So I'm very excited about this formation of this Cannabis Control Board. I think this is definitely the right route to go. That's one of the reasons that I'm in such support of S.54 and getting this passed.
Tim, we've heard stuff thrown around like 500 square feet for a canopy for a small tier cultivation license. Where do we find that number, 500 square feet? And is that written in stone, or what's the deal with that?
Interestingly enough, 500 square feet is one of the few metrics that are actually in S.54 in terms of the priorities, in terms of what they're looking at for the smallest scale of the cultivation license. Now, obviously, that could be changed in reconciliation. The bill is not complete yet, as Representative Gannon and Dave said, but that number has been thrown around quite a bit, and that is what they are looking at for the small scale cultivation license.
Can I, please? So the bill, both the House version and the Senate version, contemplates the following licenses: cultivators with tiers by canopy size, wholesale licenses, manufacturing licenses, that is, you take the grown product and you turn it into something else, whether you're making edibles or whether you're doing the extracts, or both, a retailer license, and a testing lab license. The House version of the bill contemplates one additional kind of license, and that's what's called an integrated license. This integrated license is a license for the existing medical marijuana dispensaries that would be in lieu of any other license. They would not be able to obtain any other license if they obtain an integrated license. So basically, an integrated license says, yeah, you can do the things that all of those other licenses would allow you to do, as if you procured each one of those, which, by the way, anyone could do. Anyone could obtain one of each kind of license. The integrated license is contemplated to allow a medical marijuana dispensary to sell to the public. The idea would be that at the same time those integrated licenses are issued, we would issue small-scale cultivation licenses to independent growers. Those independent growers would then be allowed to sell to the integrated licensees, as well as to medical marijuana dispensaries that did not obtain an integrated license. The idea there is, let's get the small growers who we know are dominating the market today, the unregulated market, let's give them an attractive option as early as possible to start feeding the regulated market instead. We want to keep that license cheap. We want to make that license easy to not just get, but easy to comply with. And there are provisions that we can talk about in the bill about exemptions from certain rules for those small licenses. But I think the key thing to keep in mind is that there's going to be this period where, under the House bill, where the medical dispensaries with an integrated license would be the only people selling to the general public. During that period, they would be buying from independent growers, so there's not a pure monopoly over the market. And also that period will last 5 months. After 5 months, the retail licenses would then start issuing under the House bill. And at that point, it's open competition. There's no limit on the number of licenses. Now, maybe John can weigh in on the thought of why it is that the House felt that earlier sales at 5-month period would be beneficial. I know that's something that's been, controversial in the press and in the public.
Right. So, why we're allowing integrated licenses for the medical marijuana dispensaries? I mean, we heard a lot of testimony from the medical dispensaries about their ability to stay in business. So that's one of the reasons we consider it. The other thing we're trying to balance is eliminating the black market. The medical dispensaries are already up and running. They're already regulated. So it would be very easy for them to start selling on a retail basis, which gives an opportunity to small growers to have a market to sell to legally and get those small growers into the legal market as quickly as possible with as least regulation as possible.
Okay, well, so we got to the dispensary preference issue before we wanted to. I know that everyone has spent a lot of time thinking about that dispensary head start issue and what that means for other retailers, what that means for other cultivators. I know how there's different feelings about the dispensaries and the quality of product that they produce and the price that they produce it out and the way they've served their patients over the years. But, I mean, look, the reality for today's discussion is that that is in the bill as it was described. And some version of of a head start, a period where the dispensaries are going to get to run retail before anybody else. That is the reality. And so this is, this is, in my opinion, my personal opinion, this is an acceptable compromise and not quite what the dispensaries had initially wanted. And this is a version, as Dave described it, of something that we can live with. That's my personal opinion. But it's just the political reality, I think, at this point, that dispensaries are going to be able to be the first ones to sell, to make legal retail sales under a scenario like Dave suggested. Tim, did you want to add to that?
The key to making this work is the conjunction of the expedited cultivation licenses. This is the most important thing. We could open up retail stores tomorrow, and the reality is there's no products to sell. It needs to be seed to sell tracked. We need to have testing. We need to make sure that the testing protocols are in place. That way there's no pesticides, there's no mold. There's a lot of work to be done before we can open up retail, and that's just the reality. Just the basic realities of running a business, starting a business up, finding a lease, getting insurance, getting all your ducks in a row. And we've been working with several of our clients who have a vision of a retail shop, and we're starting now, prior to the bill even being passed, because a lot of the foundation that needs to be laid does take time. I know a lot of people are not happy with the dispensary head starts. The 24-month originally being bantered about was ridiculous. This is a way, it's a compromise. We're doing this legislatively. Compromise is the name of the game. There are things that we may not like. There are things we may like. The reality is that sometimes we have to accept some of the things that we may not agree with in order to get forward momentum. This is one of those issues. But having that expedited cultivation, allowing Vermont to do what it does best, which is grow anything, especially cannabis, is really critical. And that is going to give an opportunity to a lot of these rural areas to start generating revenue, to start hiring people, to start putting forth resources into the local economy. This is a critical component of making it work. And as long personally as I see these expedited cultivation licenses in line and moving forward with the retail sales, I also do really support this. And I think that, it's at the very least, if you're against it, have that conversation, keep an open mind, and understand where this is coming from.
Okay, I want to get Laura into this discussion a little more. A lot of the legalized industries throughout the country, especially we see it a lot in California, and Massachusetts, have social justice, social equity as part of their licensing application process. In a lot of jurisdictions, including Massachusetts, those licenses have been given out based on racial statistics of how many tickets were given to people of different races and so forth. Those types of statistics based on race, I don't think translate very well into Vermont. Those kind of statistics aren't available in Vermont. What does social justice, social equity in cannabis look like in Vermont?
I think I'm really glad that I got that question, because I think that one of the most important things to do in any conversation about this issue is to recognize the horrible racism that's been promulgated in the name of marijuana prohibition, and to recognize that legalization, of course, is about industry and economic opportunity, but it also has to be about righting the wrongs that were done in the name of marijuana prohibition, particularly to people of color and to less wealthy people. So it's been more challenging to keep that in the forefront of the conversation than some might think. We did get legalization passed, which is a huge step in the right direction. I think we still have more to do as far as straightforward criminal justice system reform. There were some legislative proposals along the way that reduced penalties above an ounce that didn't make it into the legalization bill. I would like to see all the penalties for marijuana possession, cultivation, and sales also come down to be more reflective of what the majority of people believe is the right. We have expungement proposals. People are eligible to have their marijuana misdemeanors expunged right now, but we have to petition the court in order to do that. I think expungement should become automatic for misdemeanor crimes. That should happen without a petitioner having to go to the court. It should just happen as a matter of automatic process. There's excellent bills on the wall right now that would achieve that. There's one in the Senate and one in the House. They're basically the same, and we have a lot of champions in the legislature that also want to see that happen. What those expungement bills would also do would decriminalize, for those of you that remember a lot of dialogue about that term, between 1 ounce and 2 ounce, possession of between 1 ounce and 2 ounce. So there's still a long way to go in regard to straightforward criminal legal system reform, which was not exactly your question, I recognize.
I think that's part of social criminal justice reform is part of social justice, but I also would like to hear about, I guess, social equity and how do we get people able to participate in the industry that don't have the kind of wealth.
So the social equity provisions have been growing and gaining momentum. The early states that legalized did not have social equity provisions in their laws for a number of reasons. Now, almost all of the states that are legalizing are considering social equity from the beginning, which I think is absolutely critical and really exciting. Illinois is getting a lot of press right now, and if you're interested in this issue, you can look at what Illinois is trying to do. It's one of the most progressive social equity plans that we've seen yet. This is really hard. It's easy to say we want the industry to be welcoming to people who have been harmed by marijuana prohibition, either by the criminal legal system consequences of it, or by virtue of their race or gender or other category. But it's harder to figure out how to implement that. Massachusetts was got a lot of had a bumpy start in trying to implement some of its social equity provisions because it didn't work. They had goals of setting a certain percentage of minority-owned businesses and that kind of thing, and it didn't work. And so what we have in Vermont was I know the House Government Operations Committee worked on this quite a bit to figure out how to do this and how to do it well, as did the Senate. And scattered throughout the bill, you'll see places where social equity is given some consideration. For example, one of the things that's prescribed by the legislature in this proposal is that one of the preferences for licenses be given to minority business, women-owned businesses, and considerations around people who have been disproportionately impacted by marijuana prohibition. Also on the timeline, one of the very first things that the Cannabis Control Board would do with this proposal is to start to look at collaborating with other governmental agencies to see how to bring those groups, minorities, women, people who've been disproportionately impacted, into the regulated industry. There are other really key things to do that are going to be left to the Cannabis Control Board, keeping the fees as low as possible, letting the number of licenses for the small operations, not just cultivations, but other kinds of small businesses, keeping that as low as possible. I've heard people advocate that that is the most important thing that you could do to bring traditionally underserved groups into an emerging cannabis industry, is to give them access by removing monetary barriers to access. And so I think that's a really important part. I think Andrew raised an important question. Because of the demographics of Vermont, it's difficult to say that X number of licenses will be reserved for X group, but you can look at statistics, and this is one of the things that the Illinois proposal does, but look at statistics like which areas have the majority of marijuana arrests taking place, and look at the way disproportionately impacted communities can be defined in ways that are not just by traditional demographic information.
Can I do that? So first, I want to really commend Laura for centering social justice in her work in the legislature. I'm there, I see it. She's focused on this stuff to her great credit. A lot of the folks out there, Laura is a professional lobbyist. A lot of professional lobbyists are out there pushing for a particular financial interest, and that's not what I'm seeing. And I think, it was really, it was great to be able to tag team with Laura in the Senate Judiciary, where we got a couple of very specific things added to the bill. One, I think critically important, and let me tell you why it's critically important as well. We inserted language into the bill saying that your prior criminal history cannot be used to deny you either a license or an employment certification in this industry, unless the control board can demonstrate that your prior criminal history shows that you pose a threat to public safety now. Okay? This is huge. And it may not seem like very much, but people get denied employment opportunities based on their previous criminal history every day. Every day. And to perpetuate that in the cannabis industry would be idiotic. We made sure that that's in there, and one of the things that Laura and I both focused on was the fact that in Vermont, if you are a black or brown Vermonter, you are 4 times as likely to be pulled over. Once pulled over, you are 3 times as likely to be searched. Only 1/3 as likely to be found with contraband. Gee, how does that work? We know that if we deny licenses or employment opportunities based on criminal history, that will filter out to harming black and brown Vermonters most. And for me, that is wholly unacceptable, and I am really glad that the legislature has listened on that front to the point where now, me saying that to legislators is no longer controversial. So, and on the same note, I want you to know that here in Burlington, those same racial disparities in police statistics we're seeing. And guess what? In the 1 year since legalization went in, from July 1 to June 30th, police in Burlington have searched 70% fewer drivers. The one other thing is the Senate has required that the control board have a member of the control board who has expertise in social justice and equity issues. The House proposal has moved that direction to the advisory panel instead of the control board. My concern is that expertise be there in one way or another, so I'm glad that it's in there.
Tim, did you have anything
I just want to mention, one area in which we're seeing some social equity progress. Massachusetts has recently approved delivery licenses, and they mandated that the first round of these delivery licenses go to social equity applicants, which is a very low barrier to entry. One of the issues with the social equity programs is that a lot of times, even if a preference is given due to the high barrier to entry, whether it's the application fee, whether it's the process, whether it's the necessity for capital, really excludes a lot of people. Delivery is one area. S.54 does not have delivery licenses in it, but it does put forth a mandate to explore and look at other states' delivery programs. That's one area in which we really do, at least I personally feel, that there could be some real progress with social equity, is delivery licenses for equity candidates.
Okay, I'm going to shift gears a little bit away from social equity. By the way, I'm going to have like 5 more minutes, and we're going to open it up to your questions. So I guess I'm just going to have a couple more questions for these guys. But the next one is a big one, and I think probably several of these people are going to want to talk about this. But why don't we start with Tim? And the question I have, and the notes say, keeping it small in Vermont. So what I meant by that is stopping. Is it a good idea? Is it a concern of ours to keep it small in Vermont? Are we worried about big companies, one big company being the Vermont cultivator? Are we worried about one big company owning multiple retail locations? Are we worried about big companies coming from Colorado to buy a part of our industry, or coming from California with their expertise and their money and buying a piece of our industry? The first question is that a bad thing or a good thing for Vermont? I'm not sure about that. I welcome that foreign investment, or that out-of-state investment, and those jobs they're going to create, and the jump start for the industry that injection of capital could bring. It might not be all a bad thing. That's my own personal take on it. But how do we stop that from taking over the industry? How do we keep a place for the small cultivators and for you guys to participate in our industry?
This is a tough question. You're asking me all the easy ones. This is definitely one of those hot-button issues that people feel very strongly about. And I feel that there needs to be a balance. I think S.54 does the best job it can with striking that balance. Isolationism does not work. Simply shutting out anybody from outside the state to come in limits experience, it limits jobs, it limits capital. In this industry, it's very difficult to raise capital. very hard to simply go to your friends and family and come up with enough money to be able to really do something good. So there is a need for some of that outside influence. The reality is that this industry has been developing for the last 5 years out west. And there are some companies, there are some individuals, there are some corporations who do the right thing. They care about the environment. They care about the impact that they are having on wherever they end up setting up shop. They care about local economies and local people. Those are the companies we do need to come in. We do need to bring their experience. We do need to bring their capital. But, and it's a huge but, that does not mean that that shuts out the small-scale mom-and-pop operations that so many of you as both clients and hopefully future clients are getting set up right now. We can't shut out the small guy, but we also can't just simply put up a fence around our border and say nobody can come in. So it's important to strike a balance. S.54 does that with the priorities for small cultivation. You're not going to get a lot of big major corporations who are interested in a 500 or even 1,000 square foot canopy. You are going to find a lot of craft Vermont small scale growers who are very interested in those small scale licenses. So, you know, I do believe that S.54 strikes a balance. I think there's some more work to be done. I think that, you know, we've talked back and forth about residency requirements. Those have proven in other jurisdictions not to be very effective. There's ways around them. They don't serve their purpose. So I'm happy to see that there's no real residency requirements here. But giving preferences to Vermont businesses, sure. Giving preferences to businesses that have an environmentally sustainable plan, absolutely. Those are incredibly important components, whether it's a small-scale cultivator, whether it's a larger-scale operation coming in from out of state. What I think is not so much where are you from, but are you going to follow your business in a Vermont way? Are you going to take care of your steward of the land? Are you going to work in conjunction with the local residents wherever you happen to set up shop? That, to me, is the most critical component. And I think S.54 does strike a decent balance. Is there some work to be done? Sure. Does the Cannabis Control Board need to take that into consideration when they're granting applications? Absolutely. But it's a tricky question.
Did you have something to add, John?
Sure. I mean, this is something that we worked on a lot during the committee and taking testimony. And, you know, a lot of people say, well, why not just limit it to Vermont residents to get a license? Well, the question is that may not be constitutional, first. Two, is okay, you limit to Vermont residents, but how are you going to control who are the investors behind that licensee? I mean, it would be very difficult for this Cannabis Control Board to figure out who might be all the investors behind any specific licensee. I mean, it could be many ways. It could be a Vermont corporation could be created, but it still could have outside investors. So what we did, instead of going down that path of restricting licenses based on residency, we focused on making sure that there's only the dispensaries can have integrated licenses. We're focused on prioritizing small growers, getting licenses first, and there's a whole bunch of priorities about, you know, encouraging small businesses, minority businesses to have priority in getting licenses. And I think through those types of tactics, it's a much better approach to controlling the market than trying to restrict licenses to a residency or something else, because I think that might not pass legal muster.
Dave?
Funny story, in 2016 when S.241, the first tax and regulate bill to make it through the Senate, made it through the Senate, it didn't have any restrictions on how many licenses a person could hold really. It said it did, but it left open this massive loophole that you could just use affiliated companies to hold various licenses. Too bad Dave's not here anymore. The Lieutenant Governor was then a state senator. I talked to him at the time, and we worked on a floor amendment that passed. And poor Dave was on the floor trying to explain to his fellow senators what it means to control another person under the securities laws. I don't think I prepared him enough. That amendment passed. It left open a few loopholes that in future bills, H490 last year, and in S.54 this year, really does a good job of closing. So what I mean is that if you, doesn't matter through what legal mumbo jumbo you use, layers of companies, companies that own companies that own companies that own companies all the way down. Doesn't matter. We're going to look to beneficial ownership meaning even if you use a nominee arrangement, I'm a corporate lawyer, so I really try to think through these things. There is no way that you can get around beneficial ownership. There is a limit that says that a person cannot own more than 10% of more than one license. And so that's how we're going to stop the MedMens of the world from taking over the Vermont cannabis scene. We're not going to have a cap on the number of retailers. We're not going to have a cap on the number of grow licenses, etc. And you can own one. There will be competition in this market, and I guarantee you there will be competition in this market. The most important thing that I've been advocating for, that Laura's been advocating for in the State House, and what legislators are hearing from everyone, is that this market needs to serve consumers, not financiers. And I'm really proud of the work we've done on this front of limiting monopolization. So again, you'll be able to own one of each type of license. Each type of license will permit you one location, so a retail license allows you one store. You won't see franchises, you won't see McBud, you won't see Starbud. Starbud exists. I've talked to the owner. The guy's got 13 locations in Colorado. He's doing great. I like him. He's a good guy. I don't want 13 Starbuds, lining Church Street here. I don't think anybody else does either.
Why not? Okay. Laura, go ahead.
Real quick, one last thing on the issue of the small cultivators. To me, the more critical part of this issue is not who we're going to keep out, but ensuring access for the smallest players, which does two critical things. It does the kind of economic justice, diversity, access to the emerging market that we were talking about in the social equity conversation. It also achieves the goal that is very important to the legislature and I think to a lot of people of allowing people to move from the unregulated market into a regulated market in a way that's easy, it's understandable, it's affordable, it's straightforward. So if a small farmer wants to sell a small amount of cannabis from their small farm, they have an easy way to do that. And I think that as a community, Operations Committee did a lot of important things in the use of the word shall, which is timely in the news right now. But they left a lot of things open to the Cannabis Control Board, but they mandated that the board consider the needs of small growers. And they mandated that this tiered cultivation system. And they mandated that exceptions be made for small growers when appropriate. So I think those are really, really goes a long way to telling the board that this has to allow access to the industry.
Okay, well, I've got, it's 1:15. I've got a number of topics that we haven't touched on that were on my list, and just a few of them are the local control, whether towns are going to be able to opt out or opt in to cannabis retail, to marijuana retail sales in their jurisdiction. Roadside testing has been an issue which we could discuss. Lounges and social clubs, and we touched briefly on delivery. Environmental considerations of cannabis cultivation. Marketing to children and marketing at all. There's some states like in Colorado, cannabis marketing is very limited. There's no package design. It's sold in a plain package, same in Oregon. So are we going to have packaging? So we can talk about all that stuff, or I thought you guys probably have some questions. So let's open it up to the floor. Tito.
It's in the bill. It's flowering canopy, and let me say that 500 square feet. It's funny to me that thing is still in the bill because I proposed that at a barn party to a senator, and it somehow made its way into a bill. The idea was at the time was to get small growers in with a $500 500 square foot canopy, and I thought it would be easy to sell. I guess it was. I think, as we see the collapse of legal market cannabis prices at the wholesale level, I think it really is time for the legislature to move past 500 and onto 1,000 square feet. We've seen in Colorado, the wholesale price has dipped from $2,000 a pound to start to now $800 a pound. In Oregon, in just 2 years, the wholesale price has collapsed from $2,000 a pound to $400 a pound. Guys, $400 a pound. People pay that for ounces. So I think it's time to talk with legislators about increasing that. 1,000 square feet, ought to be able to get a small grower, anywhere from $60,000 to $90,000 a year in gross sales into the wholesale market. And I feel like that's a pretty small business, and that's the kind of small business we ought to be encouraging. That's what I'm talking about at this point. Well, right. I mean, it's really just about flowering canopy, and that's what people focus on. I think there's some discussions about breeding licenses, about having greenhouse type licenses for people who supply other growers. That is, that right now is not well contemplated in the bill. It's something that the control board is supposed to think about and recommend to the legislature. If you have some specific ideas that you want to see make it into this bill, let's chat. I can give you some tips on who to talk to.
So in the bill, the Cannabis Control Board is required to develop tiers of licenses for cultivators and retailers. So you could have a 1,000 square foot tier that could be the next tier up from the 5,000 square foot tier. So that's already contemplated in the bill. And there's tiers, not required. There's also the board can consider and establish tiers for all other types of licensees too. So there is some flexibility built into the bill to do that.
Is there any differentiation between indoor and outdoor because of square footage for that?
Did everyone hear that? The question was, is there any difference between indoor and outdoor growing operations when you talk about square footage of canopy?
I don't believe so.
There's a distinction on fees. There's a thought that the fees would be potentially higher for indoor, and that potentially the control board could impose some additional rules about energy and wastewater for indoor cultivators, because when you think about that, that's just logical.
There has been a lot of testimony about the different needs for indoor and outdoor cultivators, and so that I think what's contemplated is that the control board would make recommendations about that. So it leaves room for it, but it doesn't demand it or mandate it.
When we're reading for plant count versus square footage, it's totally different genetics.
Did everyone hear that? Yeah, if you're breeding for plant count rather than square feet of canopy, you're going to want to use different genetics. I think that's pretty true.
It's I think trying to educate legislators on plant count and how big a plant gets is that's a difficult sell.
But it's obviously true that 500 square feet is a pretty darn small outdoor grow. So.
And it is, but I do think that this is one of the strengths of a model where we're creating a cannabis control board, so that every fix that is going to be needed, because there will be lots of them, doesn't have to come back to the legislature for a legislative fix. That's much easier under an independent agency like the Cannabis Control Board will be.
And it's important to remember that what we're talking about today are exactly what Laura's saying is subject to change. Once this Cannabis Control Board is established, the regulations, if it's not working for people and that can be expressed, they can be changed. And that's an important thing to remember. The metrics we're talking about now are not set in stone. What S.54, the main purpose of S.54 that everyone's got to keep in mind, it's not about how big the grows are going to be or how much the licenses are going to be. It's the establishment of this Cannabis Control Board, this independent entity, which then in turn we can start discussing the tweaks, the fixes, the changes that need to be made. Are we going to have larger scale licenses for outdoor versus indoor? Are the fees going to stay the same? Well, we can see what works, we can see what's not working. That's really what we're here about today. And in my mind, the single most important part of S.54 and why we really all need to get behind this is the establishment of this Cannabis Control Board. That's where we're going to really see momentum. That's where we're going to get the changes made that we all want to see.
I'm not sure, sorry, I don't know your name.
have a representative from the Agency of Agriculture sitting quietly in the audience, who's been very active for every iteration of every proposal that's come through the legislature. The Agency of Agriculture has weighed in on a lot of these issues, and the idea is that the control board would be this proposal would say they're required to work with the relevant existing agencies to do some of the work, and that is mandated in the bill. So I completely agree with you that to remember that this is a plant, and that a lot of the regulation of it and the safety issues that I think most people in this room are most concerned about are going to be critically, getting the regulation of that right is as important as anything else.
And in terms of the enclosed lock facility requirement, I just want to point out that is the same requirement that's in place now for homegrown. It does not mean indoors. What the legislature intended in that, and there was some very explicit discussion both in committee and on the floor on that, is that you put a fence around it. And if it's fenced, it's enclosed, and that's it. There is nobody in the legislature who's moving this bill along wants to have what Colorado has, which is a requirement for indoor cultivation only. That is absolutely the opposite of what our legislative champions want. They want outdoor growth.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I think your point is well taken. Some of the unintended consequences in a state like Washington, where this fencing is required, it really does, they don't require you to build a fence with razor wire around any other crop, and it's really, it's overkill. The security measures ought to be left to the cultivator, in my opinion. And it does have, in Washington at least, the unintended consequences of driving people to indoor cultivation who might otherwise be cultivating outdoors. So, but yeah, I think in Vermont, we grow outside. So it's as simple as that.
We have different kinds of supporters in the legislature. And we have strong supporters who get it. People like Dave Zuckerman, who's been a long-time supporter. We have squishy supporters. Folks who, are like, okay, I don't really think this is a big deal, but I'm kind of worried about if I have a farm in my district and some kids go into it and steal the marijuana, now all of a sudden kids are going to have access to marijuana. Guys, this is what we're dealing with. So, legislation is a process of compromise. And, you try to limit the damage as best you can. And I see the fencing requirement. It doesn't say razor wire fencing. It doesn't say 8-foot fencing. It doesn't have to be a big, beautiful wall. It just has to be a fence. Farmers have fences. I feel like that is a compromise that is not going to be destructive to agriculture and is absolutely necessary to get the bill passed. Would I rather, people in the legislature recognize that, once cannabis is, sold in stores with a properly functioning regulated market and prices are doing what they're doing everywhere else, that it becomes something that people don't bother stealing anymore? Yeah, I'd love it if people came to that realization, but I've had this conversation, with legislators in committee hearings where they've specifically asked me, well, what if somebody hops over the fence? Guys, we have to, they're the elected ones.
Yeah, Tom.
My issue, I'm Tom with Good Stuff Stores, would be with the dispensary Head Start. I think could be a problem too. Number one, you have very few dispensaries, meaning they're going to have large crowds coming to these places and not very many of them, okay? Number two, I don't think they're really set up with much retail experience to checking IDs and making sure that, people that don't want us in there is keeping it away from minors and things like that. So that's a part. Dispensary, the idea of the head start of the growers growing first, you could actually give them a head start. And then when it hits the market, it hits the free market everywhere at one time.
So,
I think would be
just to address dispensaries are already in the business of checking IDs. Because in order to even walk into a medical marijuana dispensary today, you have to hold a license. So that they are.
I know. I got.
They are already in the process of verifying identification. So I don't think it's a huge step for them to continue that process on the retail side.
Well, you're talking about IDs that aren't a marijuana dispensary card, okay? Like all our stores, we actually scan everybody's ID. Got years of experience in checking IDs, 20 years in the business, not one minor that we have ever served. So that's the thing I'm starting to say. We can say they have the expertise, but there's a couple other retailers there that have been doing it for many years, and I think we're probably a lot better off doing it than the dispensaries. So, and I think the other problem is you only have maybe how many locations are there for dispensaries?
It's going to be, so the way that the House
We're gonna have lines up the
bill
door.
contemplates is that if you have so you take a look at, everyone's favorite whipping boy in Vermont medical marijuana is Shane. Shane owns 2 licenses. Each of those licenses have 2 locations, Middlebury, Burlington, Brattleboro, and one other. The integrated license idea would limit him to opening to the public in 1. I know everyone wants to shit on Shane, but I think the guy is, he's a businessman and he's running his business, and he has something that other people want, and I get that. I want to remind you all that what we're talking about here is 5 months of sales while you're buying from independent growers, and we pushed hard for that independent grower requirement to be able to start selling immediately to medical dispensaries. Again, whether they're selling to the public or not, this is something that I think growers have been advocating for, the right to grow now, even before retail stores open. The way I look at this, and I've spent a lot of time inside this bill, we're going to have, within a couple of years of this passing, we're going to have stores everywhere, taco trucks in every corner.
Well, it depends on how much the license is.
Right.
They make it like $800.
There's guidance in the bill. There's guidance in the bill for how much licenses are supposed to cost. It's not mandatory guidance, but it's guidance. And they said, it should look like Massachusetts. So here's Massachusetts. You can go on the Massachusetts Cannabis Control website and get this chart. The application fee for a retail license, a brick and mortar retail license, is $300, and the annual license fee for a retail store is $5,000. Guys, $5,000 for a retail store license is not a lot of money.
But one other question too. I own 5 stores, and I'm not a mega business, okay? And I really think, in Shane's defense too, 4 stores, 4 locations, I don't think it's too many either. So I think just one location, I don't know.
Look, I think there's
Let people grow, too.
My desire has always been to have a hyper-competitive marketplace, and I think early on, you don't want to give any one person too much control of the market, because then we end up with the same situation where consumers are angry at the incumbents that we have today with medical marijuana. And so, down the road, could the legislature be convinced to open it up for, small chain sort of things, like what you have with your accoutrement shops? I think down the road, we should be able to have that. I think down the road, we should have frickin' CSAs and farmer market sales. But that's not going to be on day one. Because again, we're dealing with legislators who, are not as comfortable with cannabis as you and I are.
Right.
Good to see another question in back. Sam, did you have your hand up back there?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're not demoralizing a market that has no competition whatsoever as there's not enough competition up here. Quality's not there. Let's do whatever we can so we can expand competition. That'll be an ugly 5 months.
Look, it's fine. Look, we think about the alternative to the early dispensary licenses is no early grow licenses, nobody to sell to for the independent growers, and 5 months where nobody's selling, other than the skate shop down there. And that's not that, or the look. It's I think what all of us here want is a properly regulated market with affordable product at a high quality as soon as possible.
I think also it's a little bit of the history is important to keep in mind when we look at the issue of Vermont's medical program. When that was in the early 2000s, when there was so much more stigma and so many more barriers to anybody talking about anything to do with any type of legal cannabis, including medical, it was a very different world. And the Vermont legislature created, of the states that were having medical programs, it was one of the most restrictive programs in the country. And that was not because that's what those entities that ended up getting those licenses were advocating for. It was the hard work of people in the really early days trying to begin this cultural paradigm shift, and it left us with, in my opinion, a medical marijuana program that had enormous flaws to it and to the disservice of patients in Vermont. But I think it's important to keep that in mind, that how that evolved and how we got to where we are, and to look at, okay, we are really trying to get from the integrated licenses to an open system in 5 months' time, which when you look at the real details of what needs to be done as far as rulemaking and getting people up to speed and getting products and getting the licenses, and look at the timeline, people worked hard, including representatives of the medical marijuana industry, to figure out how we could accelerate that timeline. And it was accelerated quite a bit from some of the original proposals, and it does have the small cultivators licenses coming online at the same time. And so I just think it's important to put this conversation in that historical context.
And we have to look at the silver lining in this too. For those 5 months, is anyone real thrilled with the dispensary head start? Of course not. But during those 5 months, because these dispensaries will be able to start buying from cultivators who actually know what they're doing, medical patients in Vermont are going to see the best medicine that they've ever seen. And that's going to be on day one. Now, ultimately, we can talk about competition, we can talk about the small retailer, but when it comes down to it, who's more important than the medical patients that the medical system is set up to provide for? And by purchasing from Vermont small-scale cultivators, these dispensaries are going to actually start giving high-quality medicine to the people who need it the most. So there is a silver lining to this.
See a question over here?
So I got two things. First of all, if we make the dispensaries automatically the public place to go, it's going to make medical patients have to wait longer or have to deal with excessive crowds, right? Second, the retail market is already there. A number of people are in this room right now that own retail stores that could provide that service for you. And third, the dispensaries are already getting their cannabis from some other people. Now you're banking on the fact that they're going to get the marijuana from Vermont farms, and that could be possible. But what happens if they don't? These guys in this room right now are not set up to buy it right now. You know who they want to buy it from? The Vermont farms. So easiest best solution.
I hear you. Man, that does sound like the easiest and best solution by far. The problem is, or the perceived problem is, amongst other things, seed-to-sale tracking. So there's a feeling that cannabis or marijuana that's going to be sold legally in a legally licensed retail store location is going to be grown from seed, and that seed is going to be tracked with the seed-to-sale tracking system. And so we're going to be a regulated system with the first seed. They're going to be the first legal seed. And so buying from whoever's out there that might be selling, it doesn't address that problem of the state wanting to know where every seed came from, who grew it, and be able to trace back to that seed. So I hear you. I love that. I love your idea. I love your idea of letting, good stuff and full tank and tea and Bird Gallery just open up retail sales on day one. I think that is so straightforward. and to be able to buy their product from, Tall Truck or whoever else that has product available. That's just very simple and straightforward and a great way to start the Vermont cannabis industry. But it can't happen because of the seed-to-sale tracking is what's happening in Montpelier. And that is, the seed-to-sale tracking is going to be part of the system, and that's the political reality right now. So we have another question right here.
I have a question on the weight purchasing that's available right now. As a medical patient, you're allowed 2 ounces every 30 days. As 21 and older, you're allowed to have 1 ounce on your person. Is there talk of increasing this limit? Can it be 2 ounces in one purchase? How is this language allowing for more product availability for someone who's trying to stock up? They have a high tolerance. They need this as their medicine, and they're not able to come in because there's not a delivery or whatever the situation is. Is there talks about increasing this purchasing power?
Okay, great question. In case everybody didn't hear the question fully, it has to do with the rights of medical card holders and medical patients as we move to a system of recreational sales. Does somebody want to address that?
I think Laura talked a little bit about this earlier, about bills to increase the possession limit. I would say this, I'm going to do a little role play here with Tim. Tim, you be my lawyer. Tim, I just got busted by the police. I had 4 ounces in my house.
Don't say a word.
So,
the first question is, did you grow that cannabis yourself?
So there you go. There is an exemption in the law. You can actually possess, not on your person, but in your house, any amount of cannabis, as long as you grew it yourself. Now, if Tim were to grill the police officer who arrested you at trial, Mr. Officer, how did you determine that this was illegally possessed and not grown by my client in her house? Humana. There's no answer. So, as an officer of the court, I am not urging you to perjure yourself. Please do not. Stay silent at all times. But make the state make their case. I realize that's not a perfect solution. I'm keen on working on legislation to increase the possession limits. Those things, I think once S.54 passes, you're not going to see cannabis legislation stop in the legislature. I think, legislators like John here recognize that we're going to be working on this stuff for years and years and years, and we're going to continually improve this process. And I think as more and more stigma falls away, and as federal prohibition declines, we're going to see a loosening of the system. I don't see a politically feasible way to get to perfect on day one. We're going to have to continue to struggle through imperfections and take the wins when we can get them.
Laura, did you want to add something?
I don't know if I understood your question too about all of the impact of where the law is now and this proposal on patients. And there are a lot.
I just know as a patient, you're allowed the 2 ounces to work with in a 30-day period. And so, is there any changes with this S.54 to allow more purchasing for these patients? And then when it comes retail available, will people be limited to just 1 ounce since they're not medical? That's what I'm
Right,
getting.
so there's a lot, I believe there's a lot of work to be done to the medical marijuana laws to bring them to, once this passes and since legalization passed, to have them make more sense and be fairer to patients. And the House Government Operations Committee did get input from the House Human Services Committee, who wants to they look at this bill every year, and we work to incrementally improve the medical marijuana bill. They wanted to get into that intensively next year and not have it be a part of this proposal. And so I expect there to be a lot of activity in that regard in the House in the coming session. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Originally, the S.54, the House version of it, included a whole section on medical dispensaries. Based on testimony in Human Services, we took that section out of the bill. They indicate they want to work on that. So session, they'll make some tweaks to that.
I would also just add to that, like that we see a national trend of states just folding their medical program into their recreational program. So Washington State just ended the whole idea of a medical program because people can get better medicine for cheaper just by going to buy it. So, John. Okay, just to reiterate the question, John's question was about the tax rate and feeling that it's too high to compete with the black market.
I mean, that's something we thought about a lot in committee. I mean, everything, many sections of the bill we focus on trying to balance how do we get people out of the black market into the legal market. And the tax is definitely an issue with respect to that. And it's a significant tax, but I think hopefully House Ways and Means, which has jurisdiction over the taxes, will take a hard look at that, and hopefully will balance getting people out of the black market into the legal market, and not just be focused on how much revenue we can derive from this legislation. I mean, I think that is something in government operations we're very focused on in various aspects of this bill, is how do we reduce the black market? And taxation is something we have to be sensitive to.
I think it's worth keeping in mind that any kind of price-based tax is not going to be high for long, right? I talked earlier about how in Oregon, so I was in Oregon last Christmas, and I went to a store, and they were selling $2 grams, tax included. Guys, that's $56, $57 an ounce with the tax. So the tax is not making, that's a 25% tax in Oregon. That tax is not making that market uncompetitive. The key to getting low prices in a competitive market in Vermont is licensing everyone. All of the small growers who are growing today illegally should grow legally. We should forgive all their sins, absolve them for their past, give them a cheap license, and let them sell into this market. When you do that, you won't notice a 14, 16, 20% tax. You won't even notice a 30% tax. Frankly, I'm concerned that these taxes are in the long term too low. I've given testimony to the House Ways and Means Committee that they should dump the percentage of price tax altogether and put in a flat tax of what I propose is about $1.50 a gram. That would be $42 an ounce. If your wholesale price is, again, $400 a pound, you would be looking at ounces selling in retail with taxes, somewhere around like $70, $75. There's not one of you in this room is going to tell me that $75 is too much to pay for an ounce of high quality marijuana. There are economies of scale. I don't want to, look, I'm not going to tell you about things that you know better than me, but we all know that there are economies of scale in this market, and that at the commodity level, these prices are going down, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it, right? And once you take away the risk premium from this market, prices collapse. I'm not telling you that's how it should be. I'm telling you that's what we've seen in every jurisdiction. And so, how do we do that? We give a path. How do we make that sustainable? Is we give a pathway to the small farmers to grow. So if you have your small scale license, and you're successful, then you can apply to increase the size of your license the next year, and the next year, and the next year, and take advantage of those economies of scale as you get them. There have been, academic studies into cannabis cultivation, and the prevailing thought among, kind of the RAND corporation types and think tank types is that long-term cannabis production costs are going to, crater to around, $40 a pound. And when we lose federal prohibition, which we will hopefully sooner rather than later, you're going to see, massive outdoor grows in Kentucky. Just like you're seeing in hemp, and there's nothing that we in Vermont can do to stop that We just need to make sure that there is room for high quality craft cultivators here in Vermont to capitalize on the Vermont brand and be successful long term.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Dave said. You know, part of it is that it's not really a national industry yet, obviously, because this stuff can't cross the state line. So that's why we can't buy for $2 grams and $50 ounces or whatever, because they can't send that stuff here from Oregon. So we're not going to be able to send our Vermont product to Oregon or to any other state. So to an extent, we're isolated, although have the benefit of all this tourism. This is a huge topic. I hear what you're saying, John. Not sure about the answer. You've had your hand up for a real long time. What do we got over here?
First of all, thank you all for being here. I think it's a great event that Heady Vermont put on today. My question today is kind of twofold about the quality standards of cannabis. As to my knowledge, right now, the medical cannabis that's distributed through the dispensaries only has to be tested for THC and CBD levels. So I could be wrong with that. Going forward, will there be different quality standards for medical versus recreational? And then I guess also, with this next legislative period coming up, how will the Vermont brand quality standards that the Vermont Agriculture Department put out, how will that impact the S.54 going forward? I hope that was clear. Thank you.
Okay, so as far as medical marijuana goes, this bill does not touch the testing of that product. This is totally focused on retail sales. With respect to testing under retail sales, all cannabis must be tested for potency and quality control in accordance with the rules adopted by the board. So the board's going to have an opportunity to adopt rules with respect to testing. So I think they're going to look at residual solvents, poisons or toxins, harmful chemicals, mold, mildew, pesticides, and obviously potency. I mean, one of the other things that the board is going to consider is whether cannabidol, CBD, percentage should be required with respect to all cannabis sold, because there is some evidence that cannabis-induced psychosis can be reduced with CBD.
Did that answer your question?
A little bit.
Okay.
But I do, the medical marijuana, the cannabis for medical marijuana dispensaries also has to get tested for impurities and pathogens and all of that. It's contemplated to be, have just as rigorous set of testing requirements as the retail adult use cannabis will be.
And I think it's worth keeping in mind, what we've seen in other states, right, is that the medical programs collapse into the adult use programs, and for good reason. Just wider distribution, better quality product, lower prices. And I think there's always going to be a need for a medical marijuana registry in Vermont, because there are people who are under 21 who definitely need access to cannabis for medical purposes. Even babies, right? There is a place for this medicine for every age group. And so we will always need a registry in order to give people legal access who are under 21. But I don't think long-term you're going to see, dispensaries, standalone dispensaries, being a big player in Vermont cannabis, because I think consumers are just going to be, medical consumers as well, are going to migrate to where products are better and prices are lower. So the lack of testing requirements in this bill is a smart political move, the lack of testing requirements for medical, because if you want to go down the path of fixing the medical system in this bill, you will fall into a jurisdictional trap in the House that you will never, ever get out of. It's more committee work, more lobbyist input, more opportunity for the antis to raise objections that it won't work. So I really do applaud John for working with Human Services Committee to take that stuff out of this bill, because I think long term, and not even that long term, the benefits to the medical patients are in getting this retail market up and running and making sure that those products are well tested by independent labs, and that those labs are overseen by our Agency of Agriculture rep has left, but he's the one who's going to oversee those testing labs.
And maybe also that medical card holders should be exempted from the tax.
Yeah, and that's one part of it.
Yeah, I think that's huge. You know, I want to push back a little bit. I think it's people in this room and people like you who have been trying so hard to make the case that there is medicinal value to cannabis, and so I don't want to be dismissive of the medical program. I hope the medical program can compete and be there for patients that need it and want a different service than someone who's going into an adult use store. So it would be my hope that the way these two industries evolve together would complement one another and get the best product to both adult use consumers and by the way, there's a lot of overlap between these two groups. But I think the medical program has a very valuable service to continue to offer as far as patient care, as far as getting the right type of cannabis for the symptoms that the patient's coming in for. So I'd like to see a system where they both thrive.
Yeah, here.
I want to talk about the lounge law, which I've noticed seems to disappear and availability. Where does all consumption come into this? Are we going to be able to open cannabis lounges, stuff like that? I saw that law years ago, but now I see nothing. So where all that stands?
Okay, great question. Just to repeat the question is about cannabis lounges, public consumption. I'm going to toss that question over to Tim.
So as it stands right now, S.54 directs the Cannabis Control Board, much like delivery licenses, to look at social clubs, public usage, event permits, with the anticipation that kind of round 2 would contemplate, once the board is formed, looking at creating and granting these licenses. I think it's critically important. I mean, right now we want to talk about medical patients. If you're a renter in Vermont and you do not have permission of your landlord, you cannot consume your medicine. Now, how many of us rent? Quite a few, myself included. And you're basically at the whim of your landlord as to whether or not you can consume your medicine, which is, to me, absolutely insane. Right now, there's, we should probably talk about this when I'm not on a panel, but there's a serious issue with the definition of place of public accommodation as currently contained within the existing legislation. S.54 does not address this other than, like I said, to tell the Cannabis Control Board once it's formed to start exploring the possibility. It's a critical component that I would have liked to see addressed in this bill. Obviously, for political reasons, we don't need to hold it up to go in the back and forth. But I think social lounges are absolutely a critical component of any viable cannabis regulation. I think that medical patients need a place that they can go consume safely. I think we've now seen the first cannabis lounge, licensed legal cannabis lounge open up in LA. There have been some ones that may be operating in the gray area in Massachusetts, San Francisco. We've seen no problems with any of them. When you think about the amount of bars per square foot in the city of Burlington, the thought of a cannabis lounge, to me, is an absolute no-brainer. I think a place where people can go, can consume safely in a private setting should exist. And I do believe that hopefully, after we get S.54 passed, after we get this Cannabis Control Board established, that will be one of the next frontiers that we really start working hard on, is getting a system to establish a place where people can go socially, congregate, and consume cannabis legally.
I want to say, Tim's absolutely right. We would really benefit, I think, economically in Vermont from having special event permits. I think that would be great for the tourism industry. I think we want to make sure that we can have, bed and breakfast sort of operations. I think those will be big draws for the tourism sector. And those are things that I talk about with reps from, the Killington area, the Stowe area, and try to build support for. Well, when you think about, the law's going to pass. Let's say the law passes, and let's say Phil doesn't veto it. that's a whole other story of whether the governor is going to veto this bill or not. Let's say it does pass and get signed into law. We don't get stores right away, right? It's going to be 18 months before a store opens. 8-9 months before the small-scale cultivators are licensed, probably 2 months before they actually start growing, but 8 months until they're licensed. So we wait. And like I said before, if you can't support this bill until it's perfect, this will never ever happen, right? We need to take our wins where we can get them. We need to limit the damage from, the response that the antis get, the response that the folks who aren't really anti but are, concerned citizens. Look, with public consumption, I live in Middlebury, big family town, right? And people are concerned that, if we have stores everywhere, that people will just be hanging out on the street, smoking pot all day long, and my kids are going to be exposed to it, and what am I going to say to my children? I think it's silly, but they don't, and they vote, and they talk to their legislators. So how is it that we can have a conversation among people who are consumers and non-consumers, and how can we come to an accommodation that all Vermonters, 90% of Vermonters can feel comfortable that, we're respecting each other's rights, we're respecting each other's personal freedoms and liberties, but also their, sense of public appropriate behavior. And those things, they take time to develop. I'm going to plug the Cannabis Etiquette book, the Vermont author, Lizzie Post put out. Get it at your local bookstore. It talks about things like that and how to, consume in a respectful manner and how to understand your non-consuming neighbors, their own fears. And I think over time, we'll be able to do that. Like I said earlier, over time, I think we'll have CSAs and farmers markets selling, and I think that's appropriate and extremely Vermonty. But that's not going to be on day one. It's just not politically feasible.
If anybody else is interested in talking about the social club issue a little more, I highly encourage you to give us a call at Vermont Cannabis Solutions. I'd love to sit down and talk a little more about it, about how possibly we could see a path forward on that.
I think fair to say that Tim is the expert on the creative aspect and possibilities of social lounges in Vermont at the moment. So yeah, please call us to talk in more detail about that if you want to. It's almost 2 o'clock. I see that there's some more questions out there. I think we're going to just wrap it up here with one last thought from each of our panelists. And it's a real straightforward question, and I just want your opinion and your thoughts. Are we going to get this done this session and get a bill passed and signed by the governor? Yes or no? John?
First question is, I think it is a priority to get it out of the House. Then it'll have to go to a conference committee with the Senate. Hopefully we can work out the differences with the Senate and get on the same page with them. If we do get on the same page with the Senate and get strong votes out of that House, like we got out of the Senate, then hopefully the governor will sign. He has some concerns, such as roadside testing, that we've tried to address in the bill. I mean, you may shake your heads about that, but if we want to get the governor to sign it, it has to be in the bill. And there are other aspects that have to be in the bill in order to get the governor to sign it. I mean, it's going to be very difficult in the House to get a veto-proof vote on this bill.
I agree with John. I think, if I'm going to read the tea leaves, we'll know who's going to be running for governor in several months. Right now, there's one declared candidate. There's a few high-profile, rumored candidates. So far, all of those people are very much pro a tax and regulate system. And, the 2020 election is going to be another blue wave election. So does Phil Scott want to lose votes because, 2/3 of Vermonters want to see this done, including a lot of fiscal conservatives who see this as a way to provide property tax relief? I don't think so. I think this passes. I think it passes with nearly a veto-proof majority in the House. I think that sends a message to the governor that this has broad support. and I think the governor ultimately signs it yet again with his mixed emotions.
I'm not nearly as enmeshed in Montpelier as these guys are, so take whatever I have to say on this matter with a grain of salt, but I'm going to really go on the optimistic bet with the will of the people here and say, yes, this is the year we finally get it done, and I certainly hope so.
Well, I'm generally a pessimist, so it's hard for me to be optimistic, but I do think that the work that's been done there is a proposal right now that's sitting in Ways and Means that has the best chances of passing that anything has yet. There was really difficult work done to meet some of the governor's requirements for signing a bill in ways that would be palatable for people that care a lot about these issues. For example, yes, there is a provision for saliva testing, but it's saliva testing with a warrant, exactly the same way as, not at the roadside, the same way that they can get your blood right now. So I think that it's important to understand the myths and the facts about what the compromises were. The compromises were still, someone like myself can hold my head up high and advocate for the compromises contained in this bill, and yet they met many of the concerns that the governor raised. The opt-in, opt-out, I don't know how interested people are in that issue. That was another compromise. It's opt-in only for retail, which means that the other types of licenses can just be issued across the state. So there was some really smart, hard work done by leadership in the Government Operations Committee in the House to get a package together that the governor could sign. And so, cautiously optimistic, yes.
Well, I just, I'm with Tim. We're cheerleaders, and we're optimistic. It's got to happen, you guys. It's got to happen right now, so it will.
Contact your legislator, seriously. Dave is so right about that. There is not one single thing that anybody in this room could do that is more important to getting this bill passed than calling your state rep, call your state senator. Just make your voice heard. This is something that we all can work together on, and we can get this thing through.
Don't forget about the governor's office. Call the governor's office too and tell them you want to see this done. Do it like Dave said. Be nice and be respectful, but tell them this has to happen right now. Thank you so much for coming. I want to thank our panel for being here. Just a little housekeeping. We're moving our office. Vermont Cannabis Solutions is moving our office from Main Street Landing to just behind Arts Riot down off of Pine Street. That is November 1st. So please come by and see us at the new offices. Come by and say goodbye to the old office if you want to, whatever. But be aware that we will be in our new space starting November 1st. That also means that the location for our luncheons is going to move to Pine Street. Looks like it's going to be an Arts Riot. We'll have a regular space for our lunches in Arts Riot, first Wednesday of every month from 12 to 2. So the next one is November. We're hoping to have NOFA, Brian and Nicole from NOFA Vermont, to talk about certification of your hemp crop, certification of your processing facility, etc. So everybody's going to want to get that certified organic label on their packages if they can. Tim and I, upcoming events, Tim and I will be speaking at the Vermont Law School Environmental Law Symposium on October 25th. The topic is reconciling agriculture and environmentalism, something like that. And Tim and I will be speaking on cannabis and the environment. So come down and join us at Vermont Law School for that event, if you'd like to. Sure, Dave?
Number one, if you have a prior drug-related criminal conviction within the past 10 years and have any interest in participating in Vermont's hemp system going forward, you must go online today, get yourself a $25 hemp permit. You will then be grandfathered in once the new regs go into effect in January. If you do not have a license before December 1 and you have a prior criminal conviction for drug-related crimes, you will be excluded from that system. So get a license. It costs $25. You don't have to use it. You just have to have it. That's one. 2, January 9th, State House Lobby Day. Come see me. Talk to Monica. Particularly if you're a small business owner who is in ancillary fields, tourism, anything that might be ancillary to the cannabis industry, we want you there. We want you talking to legislators and explaining the economic development benefits of regulation. January 9th, first Thursday of the legislative session, we're going to serve them breakfast and talk to them about cannabis. It's going to be a load of fun.
Thanks for that, Dave. And thanks, I want to thank Heady again, and Kathy just came up with a reminder about the January 9th day that Dave mentioned, so we should all be there in Montpelier on January 9th at Cannabis in the Capitol. There is a QR code. Where did you get the QR code, Monica? QR code link you to. Okay, sorry, it's right on the door right there. That QR code will link you to the S.54 summary. So the Marijuana Policy Project prepared a 2-page summary of the bill. That QR code will link you to this. This is a great resource to know, just as a thumbnail, what's in the bill. So that's a great resource for you. And I think that's about it. That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for coming.
If anybody wants to talk to us, feel free to come down to our office. We love to talk about this.